But I will be continuing our series on reviewing different Sfarim from Chachmei Morocco. Here I want to introduce you to a Sefer that has a lot of depth and many practical questions in it, which is written by Rabbi Shelomo Hakohen from Debdou, and the Sefer is called Lekha Shelomo. He also wrote Sfarim called Vayesof Shlomo. They're not newly printed. You could find them on HebrewBooks.org. And you could also order a print version from there. And this Sefer, he deals with going on trains, on Shabbat, going on airplanes. He has a whole back and forth with him, Rabbi Yosef Mesas. He deals with Kohanim going to the Bet HaKvarot. He has many very long discussions about that. And what I wanted to discuss with you today, one of the main questions that he has in his Sfarim that he discusses in Lekha Shelomo Siman Yud Gimel Vesiman Yud Daled is a subject that we touched upon when we spoke about Rabbi Shlomo ibn Dinan, which is there's a great chidush that was said by one of the Chachamim of Marrakesh in the 1700s. His name was Rabbi Shelomo Amar. This chidush was discussed at length. It has many practical ramifications to it. Maran Achida brings it down. Maran Achida already brings it down in Shiurei Bracha, I believe Siman Nun Zayin. In Yoredea. It gets a little bit technical, but follow with me because it might become, you'll see when it becomes relevant. If a person has a pot that taref was cooked in that pot, so if you cook afterwards kasher, your food is taref 100%, right? Because there's the bliot, there's the absorptions of that taste that got back into the food. It's forbidden. What happens if you waited 24 hours? Those bliot are considered spoiled, pagum. And subsequently, if you would ever cook something else into that pot, after 24 hours of usage, so whatever food you're going to have is going to be kasher b'diavad because the pagum is not going to affect it. This is why anytime you ask a question to a rabbi regarding kasher, one of the first questions he's going to ask is, was there 24 hours that passed between the usage of the pot or not? That is the reason, because it's called pagum. Now, even though it's pagum and it doesn't forbid,
how did they come to the 24 hours?
if there's an absorption in a pot,
Yeah.
and 24 hours have passed, so it becomes spoiled, the absorption.
Why 24 hours?
That's how it was. It's figured out scientifically in the Chazal. Scientifically and halachically, at that point, it's not called real food that could forbid anymore. It's in a tight space. It's an absorbed wall, and it gets ruined.
This is for taref food. Could be for anything.
Or anything, or let's say basar. Let's say you have a meat pot, 24 hours passed, and you cook milk. It won't be basar b'chalav. There is an opinion of Rashi that even overnight, linat laila, is okay, and we use that sometimes in time of need. Right, exactly. So what happens over here? If you want to use this pot, let's say a meat pot, you want to use for milk. Even if 24 hours passed, we all know you're not allowed to use that.
This is when it's not done on purpose.
Right, exactly. So that's what I'm about to say, that if you have a meat pot and it waited 24 hours, you're not allowed to use that meat pot. Because it was used for meat, and even though right now it's pagum, it's called gzera eno ben yomo atu ben yomo. You're forbidden. Comes along Rabbi Shelomo Amar and says that this is only when it was for sure something that was asur. But let's say it's something that it was an animal that was tarif, that was cooked inside, and it's a safek if it was a real tarifa. For example, you found a needle, and you don't know if the needle really punctured or you didn't puncture in the animal. It's a safek tarif. Says Rabbi Shelomo Amar that since it's only a safek, it doesn't forbid the food. since it's a safek derabanan, since the not using after 24 hours only derabanan, safek derabanan likula. You would tell me, okay, it's not such a big chidush. It's a big chidush because most poskim seems to be. I can't say most poskim. There are many poskim that would challenge this. The Pri Chadash and others say that since it's a safek that its root in is a deoraita, the safek started. Think about it. The safek started when there was a deoraita over here. The safek started whenever the meat was a safek deoraita or not, and then it turned into a derabanan. So if it started as a deoraita, it stays that way. You can't right now permit it because derabanan. But Rabbi Shelomo Amar says this interesting thing. He says that since you find it now, for now it's a safek derabanan. Since it's a safek derabanan, now it's allowed. And he compares it to the famous case that we spoke about by Rabbi Shlomo ben Dinan. If you have a safek sefeka, one safek in the guf and one safek in the ta'arovot. For example, one safek, you're not sure if this is a trifa, and it fell into another animal, and it's between both animals, you're not sure which one it is. So since it's a safek, one in the guf, safek in the ta'arovot, Shulchan Aruch says it's forbidden. Why? Because since it was a safek doraita at the beginning, you can't forbid it later. But the Bet Yosef brings in Simanun Zayin of Yoredea that if I found out I found out only once it was mixed inside that it was a safek, then I could permit everything. Why? Because at the time that I found out, I have a sfeka here. This is a very controversial Bet Yosef. So Rabbi Shelomo Amar says, just like we permit, once you found out that it's a safek, because right now it's a sfeka. So over here too, right now I find that it's a safek derabanan, it's allowed. This is brought in Shelot Uchuvot Kerem Chemer, I believe Siman Chaf Aleph, in the name of Rabbi Shlomo Ibn Sur, that he says that a safek derabanan like this and a sfeka that you find it afterwards, shkulim hem, they are equal, and therefore he permits it. You have no idea how much this psak caused controversy in Morocco. How much controversy. So what happened was that Rabbi Shelomo Hakohen says that he was on vacation in the city of Miknes for its pure air. Avi, is that true that Miknes has pure air compared to Debdou? He was there for vacation for its pure air. He was from Debdou. And could be, I forget where he was Dayan at the time. Rabbi Shelomo Hakohen. And he came to visit the chief rabbi of Yeshua Berdugo. So this must be any time between the 30s and the 50s. Somewhere around this time. What? Not so long ago at all. He talks about trains and airplanes. So he was there between the 30s and the 50s, and he was staying by the house of Rav Yeshua Berdugo, which is the chief rabbi of Morocco. He says a young man came to visit him. This young man was called Shalom Misas. Rabbi Shalom Misas came to visit him and had a criticism on something that he wrote in Vaye'esov Shelomo. And V'yosef Shelomo, he wrote that a safek like I described, that if you find in the karkashta, which is one of the intestines, it was a safek terifa, got mixed in something else, and you found out later. So he says, even though it's a safek sveka, that you found out afterwards that the Bet Yosef permits it, but in the Shulchan Aruch it's not clear. And since even though in the Bet Yosef he permits it, the Shulchan Aruch is not clear, you can't forbid it. And Rabbi Shelomo says, no, we follow Rabbi Shelomo Amar, who says that when you find the safek is later, it's equal to when you find out the sfeka later, and in one shot it should be allowed because it's a double safek. I hope I didn't lose anyone yet. But that's so he has two teshuvot, Rabbi Shlomo Hakohen, fighting back and forth with Rabbi Shalom Misas. Rabbi Shalom Misas was an expert in Hilchot Basar v'Chalav Ta'arovot. When he was young already, when he was 17 years old, he wrote most of his Sefer called Mizrach Shemesh, which is a masterpiece on all of the laws of Yoredea. As a matter of fact, when I used to ask Rabbi Shalom Misas, I would ask him questions on Yoredea, right away he would shoot out to me, what's the halacha here, what's the halacha there? He was, at an elderly age, he still had it all in front of him, this mastery on the laws of Yoredea, which is the laws that are practically usually you test for samicha. It's another story what happened exactly over there. But it was phenomenal sefer. And here you see already at a young age he was the chief rabbi of Morocco. Rabbi Yeshua Berdugo asked that Rabbi Yeshua that Rabbi Lekha Shelomo answers back Rabbi Shalom Misas, who was a young man at the time, and they battled it out. It's also printed in Shilot Uchuvot Tvuat Shamesh Rabbi Shalom Misas. And he was of the opinion that we follow this Rabbi Shelomo Amar, also on Sfik Sfika. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you, I think I said it last time, that the Ben Ish Chai in Raf Pe'alim, Chelek Aleph, Yoredea, Siman Chaf Aleph, writes that you don't follow this Sfik Sfika. If you found out afterwards, it doesn't matter. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't write it. The Bet Yosef writes it, but we don't follow the Bet Yosef if it's written explicitly in the Shulchan Aruch. So the Ben Ish Chai says we don't follow, like Rabbi Shelomo Hakohen, we don't follow this Bet Yosef in Siman Nun Zayin. And a lot of Chachmei Morocco were against that. Rabbi Shalom Misas, as the Asher Shlomo of Rabbi Shlomo Hakohen, it seems to be Rabbi Rafael Berdugo in two places that way. His son Rabbi Mimun Berdugo. They have a list of things that they did follow. That seems to be Chachmei Morocco went against the Ben Ish Chai. Rav Ovadia Yosef in his Teshuvah on his glosses against the Ben Ish Chai in Yibia Omer Chelek Chet Siman Chaf Aleph writes that in his opinion, we don't follow the Ben Ish Chai as well. And he quotes many of the Chachmei Morocco. Rav Avad Yosef was probably the one in the generation the most proficient in all of the Sfarim of Chachmei Morocco. He had them all in front of him, and there was one Chacham of Morocco that was the exception that sided with the Lekha Shelomo, Rabbi Shelomo Hakohen. His name was the Yismach Ovadia, Rabbi Yismach Ovadia from Sofro, the father of Rabbi David Ovadia. And he says, I don't understand. Why should we follow the Bet Yosef? The Shulchan Aruch writes it explicitly. It's a chidush. We shouldn't follow that. And he says he very strong words. It says, who says that we should ever follow these words? He quotes the Lekha Shlomo says. It wasn't really Lekha Shlomo. It was Rabbi Shelomo says tshuva in Lekha Shlomo, and he says we shouldn't follow this. And therefore, besides those two exceptions, it seems to be many of the Chachmei Morocco said that we follow this type of Sfik Sfika and Safik D'Rabbanan. Now you say, okay, when this has ever come up, it comes up. It could come up in different ramifications. That whenever you have a Safik, that let's say you have an item, the guy tells somebody comes to you and says, Rabbi, I'm not sure if this was kosher or not. I'm not sure if I cooked it with milk or meat, and it's mixed in with something else. And he says, so I'll ask him, when did you find out that it was not? You weren't sure if it was kosher. Oh, I only found out once it was mixed in. That would be allowed according to Chachmei Morocco, and according to Ben Ish Chai, it would be forbidden. That's when it would be. That's when it would be a nafka mina, and it could happen. Or anything that you found out that was cooked in a pot, and then there was absorptions after 24 hours, and you're not sure if it was kasher or not. Rabbi Shelomo Amar is going to permit that. Yes.
Did you just express beforehand that the Shulchan Aruch was not clear?
Shulchan Aruch was not clear, but in the Bet Yosef, he was clear. So this is where there's the big discussion. I spoke about 2 weeks ago, when the Bet Yosef is clear, Shulchan Aruch is not clear. This is the big subject. This was the controversy.
I'm trying to understand the gentleman that you mentioned his name, the other Ovadia gentleman.
Yeah.
He came up with the strong words.
Yeah.
He was saying the Shulchan Aruch says X.
Yeah, he was saying because in the Bet Yosef, he quoted it, but he didn't bring it in the Shulchan Aruch, so we discount the Bet Yosef. And the others said, no, we count the Bet Yosef. So that is the review of the week. Chazaku Baruch.